Hi, thanks for joining. Please make sure you subscribe to follow us on all the various platforms here on the podcast, as well as on YouTube, the stuff we write on Substack, as well as quick takes on Instagram and on Threads. If you're enjoying what we're putting out there, please make sure you're sharing with all your friends and family. And if you have questions or comments about the stuff we're putting out there, please make sure you leave them in comments to us. We'd be more than happy to cover them in future talks. Just as a warning, we are going to be touching on some subjects that might trigger some listeners. If you or somebody you know happens to have an eating disorder, please make sure that you seek help or have them seek help. As a reminder here, we are not your primary care provider. We are simply giving you some information and talking about some subjects that based off of the physiology and the psychology for how we work as humans. Well, we reach that time of the year where we start worrying about, have we made all the progress we should have made throughout the year? Will this season of feasting somehow put me back, somehow undermine all of the progress I've made all year round? Where we start seeing all the influencers out there telling us, oh, we should be aware of this and be aware of that. We should cut this and cut that. We start having conversations with our friends and family about, let's go and do the 5Ks. Let's go and do the holiday runs. Let's go and do the holiday workouts as a means to offset all the food we're about to eat, which leads to a very important question. A question that we should always have in the back of our mind. Does one meal actually undermine everything I'm working for? Well, let's talk about that.
Warning. The following presentation contains information that might contradict what you have previously heard, or believed to be true, about how the human body works, and contains material that is not suitable for closed-minded individuals. Enjoy.
So when we start looking at this idea and start looking at this conversation about the changes in diet that might take place during the holiday seasons, one of the things we have to be very aware of is the fact that no one meal, no one day of eating is going to be detrimental to everything. It's going to somehow put me back to square one, that's somehow going to undermine everything that I've been working for in terms of either weight loss or in terms of gains in health. When we start looking at this idea, one of the things that kind of keeps popping back into the conversations that I've been having with students, I've been having with colleagues, that I've been having with people who've been asking for consultations, the notion is the weight issue. And more importantly, what does the scale tell me as it relates to how healthy I happen to be? And it goes into that kind of misconception about what is the weight telling me. But the other thing is coming into play. Outside of that scale, outside of that weight issue, is the misguided notion about what is in our food. And the fact that we're thinking incorrectly about what we're eating and how we're eating and why we're eating the foods that we're eating. And it goes into a lot of this contextualization that we might see, particularly when we start getting these influencers out there saying, oh, well, it's the additives that are in these foods that are making us sick. It's the additives in the processes. It's the fertilizers that get sprayed onto the crops. It's these vitamins that get fortified into all of the grains that we're eating. Because when I go to Europe, when I go on vacation, I don't have the gluten issues. I don't have this issue or that issue as it relates to dietary fallouts or gastrointestinal distress, without understanding that there's a reason for that. And it has to deal with the fact that I have reduced the amount of stress that I'm feeling when I'm on vacation, when I'm in relaxed state. And one of the things we have to look at when we start looking at this holiday idea and the fact that we're looking at this notion of eating as a way to have community, as a way to have some sort of interactions with all of our friends, all of our families, to have some sort of joining with the people who we want to enjoy time with. It doesn't mean we have to sit there and eat everything that is out on the feast table. We don't have to eat everything that's there. And some of us are raised where it's an insult not to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, not to go ahead and have first and second and third servings. Where some people have been asking, well, we're taking this GLP-1 medicine now, and it's not making me hungry. Am I going to be offending my host if I'm not eating everything? Let them know. You don't have to tell them the dosage that you're taking. You don't tell them about the medicine you're taking. just tell them that, hey, I'm cutting back on my food intake. And don't do it as if you're looking for some sort of positive reinforcer, or where if you happen to be the host and the person is telling you that they're going to be cutting back on the food. So don't expect me to have first, second, and third servings this holiday. Don't go, oh, that's great. That's wonderful. I was hoping you would start to lose weight. It sends the wrong message, because once again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to do this in a body positive notion, in a notion that is not going to encourage some sort of body dysmorphic tendency to arise. A lot of times when we start thinking about the way, how am I going to approach this holiday season? How am I going to approach the feasts that I'm going to be involved with, the potlucks that I have to go to, the company parties that I have to attend? All of these things put undue pressure on me, particularly if I happen to have some sort of anxiety about my body image, some sort of anxiety about my body weight. And what this does is this leads to issues surrounding how much am I willing to eat. And that anxiety can drive me to want to eat more, can actually make me want to consume more than what I should be consuming, based off of all of the normal feedback regulations that we've been talking about. All of the hormones, all of the neuroendocrine signals, all of the neurotransmitter signals that are taking place within my body, that are sending back signals to my brain that's saying, hey, stop eating, we have enough stuff. Or, hey, slow down, we need time to digest. Or within the brain itself, where we have this anxiety, and if we're having this anxiety around the food, it can make me want to seek out rewards. And if I happen to have issues already in terms of how much am I eating, how well am I eating, what types of foods am I seeking out, it's going to, and it can drive distinct reward behaviors where I'm trying to get that quote unquote dopamine fix from the foods, from the activity, where instead of seeking out foods for the reward, seek out other things for the reward. Look at how I can use the meal, how I can use the camaraderie with all of my friends, all of my family as the reward, as opposed to over-consuming food as a reward. Or even think about, how am I going to justify the food internally to me? Not how am I going to offset the food that I'm eating with what I intend to do later on. And that's where we get this idea that we're thinking about the food incorrectly. The food is not the reward. The food is the nutrition that we need for our body to maintain itself. The food is the nutrition that we need in order for all of the cells, all of the tissues, all of the organs in our body to function optimally, to allow for the adaptations that we're trying to get from the gym, from the exercise routine that we're following. All of those things come into play when we start looking at the foods that we're going to consume, and how we're going to consume them, and why we're going to consume them. And this is where we start having this misconception and this misnotion about, and it really is about that calorie in, calorie out misconception that we have been harping on for quite some time. And the misguided notion that the calorie diet and the caloric balance happens to be in terms of, I have to cut calories in order to lose weight, I have to gain calories in order to gain weight. And what this does is puts an incorrect impression into, why am I going to eat, and what types of foods am I going to eat? And when I don't have that correct notion, when I don't have that correct feedback going on, that's going to allow me to eat what I should be eating at the correct levels that I am eating, it can provide anxiety, it can provide guilt, it can make me want to change how I approach the food, change how I approach the holidays, where it could even be an aversion to or an avoidance of these big parties, where I'm not going to go to the big party because I don't want to have that external stressor of, here is all this food, and I have to be very careful because everybody already sees me as this, already sees me as that, in terms of, oh, that's the big person over there. The big person is going to be eating everything, so I better get in line to get some food before that person gets there, because there's not going to be any food left for me. That impression that we have as relates to who's eating a lot versus who doesn't eat very much. or the impression that we get if we happen to be someone who is larger, who has weight that they're trying to lose, where they will meticulously take excessively small portions, and then everybody thinks, oh, what's wrong with that person? Or, oh, they're eating a little bit here and a little bit there because they don't want us to make fun of them because they're overeating at this one meal. And once again, it's the wrong impression for the food and why we're eating and what's the purpose of having the meal that is there. And this is where we have to start to recenter the argument, recenter the idea. And we have to start thinking about, why am I eating? What is making me feel hungry? Why have I stopped eating? What is making me feel full? And needing to be aware and cognizant of those signals, but also be aware and cognizant of the social signals that are in and around the meals that can cause psychological harm to those who have weight issues, those who have overcome weight issues, or those who just want to be more aware of the healthiness within the foods that they're eating so that they do not consume inappropriate types of food in terms of the selection process for the foods that they have within their diet, as well as the social pressures that we have surrounding what am I eating, why am I eating, how am I eating, particularly within the social context of the larger clan meetings, the larger group meetings, the social settings that we have, and the acceptance that we might have for ourselves as well as for others within the group that we happen to have, particularly as it relates to how much we eat or how little we eat. But a lot of it has to deal with the issue about overeating, or really the fear about what people might say if we happen to overeat. Thoughts and comments that creep in that look at and make us think about, do I have to skip this meal in order to be able to have this feast? Do I have to somehow up what I'm doing in terms of exercise in order to justify having this meal? And what a lot of these conversations tend to delve into is they delve into a body dysmorphic tendency. And it's not really body dysmorphia, it's not really an eating disorder, but it is a tendency. It's a misalignment about what is the food, what is the feast meant to represent, and what do I have to do in order to justify being part of that feast, being part of the community as we go through this holiday season. Justifications that lead to poor rationales that are offered, that lead to a misalignment about, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I not doing what I'm not doing? Why am I allowing these negative thoughts to creep into what should be a festive time, what should be a relaxing time, what should be an enjoyable time, what should be a stress-free time? But because we allow these ideas to creep in, it increases the stress. It increases the level of negativity in and around the meals. It makes me not want to be part of the group that I'm trying to be included with. We do this mainly out of social pressures. The social pressures have changed, and the social pressures have changed with the idea of the body positivity that's come out. We've started to accept the gambit of body images as being socially acceptable. And that's very important when we start looking at this idea about the wrongfulness of thinking about food as being something problematic. That's the crux of the idea here, is that when we start to make these justifications, we're starting to see food as the pitfall to what we need. And part of it is looking at, okay, there is this 3,000 calorie meal I'm going to eat on Thursday for Thanksgiving. But I don't understand that just my body functioning on a daily basis needs 3,200 calories worth of energy. But I don't see it that way. All I do is I see it, okay, there's 3,000 calories in this meal. That means I have to expend 3,000 calories in the gym, because I have this misconception that calorie balance is going to be weight balance. And it's that misguided notion of calorie balance being weight balance that causes some of these issues to come about. Going back into the physiology of what's going on, and how the physiology is going to lead to the psychological aspects of looking at food and looking at meals. The way in which we approach the reward response to eating is also going to dictate how I go about with my satiation versus my hunger response. And within that, because we have the interconnectedness between our brain activity, our cognitive functions, and our desire to eat or not eat, we have to look at the regulation of food, not just based off of the hormone responses coming into play for regulating am I hungry or am I full, but also the psychology taking place in how is the food I'm eating presenting, and how is that presentation affecting my cognitive drive and my psychological want for food. And this goes into a little bit more of the discussion about when am I going to be hungry and when am I going to be full. And because of the way in which the psychology comes into play, the aromas, the sights, the sounds is going to be a psychological driver towards eating. And if I'm someone that's going to, say, have multiple meals in a day over the holidays, by skipping, but still having the psychological drive to want to eat, I actually set myself up for failure in terms of the paying attention to my feedback loop to regulate how much am I going to eat. And so as I'm eating, we get these changes in hormone signals. And we get changes in hormone signals. We get reduction in ghrelin and reduction in glucagon. We get increases in insulin. We get increases in GLP-1. We get increases in leptin. We get changes in oxyntomodulin. We get changes in gastrin proteins. All of those signals start to change the way in which the hypothalamus is functioning. And all the signals change the way in which the hypothalamus is functioning to cause a swing in my dopamine and in my serotonin levels. And that change in dopamine and serotonin levels will start to make me feel less hungry. And as I start to feel less hungry, I'm able to make the compensatory thought to stop eating, even with all of the other psychological drivers being present that make me want to eat. The sights, the sounds, the smells. But if I'm paying attention to that reward response that, okay, I've eaten, I've rewarded myself with food, I don't need to eat anymore. And so I stop eating and I push the plate away and I sit there and I socialize and I have my party time. We can do the same exact thing throughout the party with smaller portions of food that allow me to go ahead and get full, feel satiated, eliminate my hunger responses by snacking over periods of time. And the snacking over periods of time might feel like I'm eating a lot of food because I'm eating over a longer period of time. But the amount of food might be very small, even though it feels like I've been eating for a long time. And it goes into something that was touched on in a discussion about food coma, and that's the lethargy that comes into play, the feeling of tiredness that comes into play following large meals. If I'm eating comfort food, I'm going to feel at ease, and it's going to make me want to eat a little bit more at the very beginning, but it's going to make me feel full, and it's going to put me at ease, and it's going to help me relax, and it's going to help me to feel better faster. And so when we start looking at the way in which we regulate our eating, if we put ourselves in a position where we understand it's okay to eat the food that we're eating, it reduces the stress and the anxiety surrounding eating. And by reducing the stress and anxiety around eating, we're able to control the amount that we're eating. We're able to utilize our own physiology to slow ourselves down. We're able to utilize our own psychology to slow ourselves down. But the problem comes in when we start having external conversations. When we start having conversations about the wrongfulness about eating, or the wrongfulness about having large meals, or the wrongfulness about having multiple large meals. And when we start having that bit of conversation, the anxiety level around eating increases. And when the anxiety level around eating increases, we end up having a change in our psychology. And that change in psychology is going to attempt to alleviate the anxiety. And when we start to try to alleviate anxiety, we start having more roles of addictive behaviors come into play, more roles of reward center coming into play. The need to get a reward response increases because we're trying to lessen the severity of the anxiety. And this is where we start having to worry about how we frame the discussion around food, particularly if we know somebody that happens to have a anxiety issue, an attention deficit issue, someone that happens to have a body image issue, or someone that is trying to compare themselves with others based off of their body image. And to that later point, to that last point about the body image issue, latest stats show that about 80% of the population is in some sort of comparison with others within the population as it relates to body image, which means that a majority of us, almost all of us, are susceptible to body image issues. This becomes more important when we start looking at people who have a dysmorphic problem with their body image, people who are displeased with their body image, because they're going to start to have those anxiety thoughts come into play. And so how can we go about controlling those anxiety thoughts so that we can minimize the negativity surrounding the meal, allow ourselves to eat appropriate, allow ourselves to feast appropriately, allow ourselves to enjoy these social interactions appropriately without feeling some sort of negative idea or negative intent from the interactions we're having regarding the food that we're eating. These interactions can cause people to suffer anxiety around the food. When we start looking at the interactions we're having with our food, the level of anxiety that we have with the food, and particularly with the meal size, or the social pressure we have around the meal sizes that we're eating, can cause changes in our reward centers and changes within our responsiveness to the food that we're eating. This is where we have to remember a couple of key things. There's no such thing as good food and bad food. There's just good choices and bad choices. One of the things that we don't want to do when we're making food choices, particularly around individuals that might have anxiety issues, is to indicate that the food that they're choosing is a bad food. It's this kind of phrasing that may lead to an increase in anxiety around the food. It may cause them to withdraw from eating specific types of food, even if that food may actually be a benefit for them metabolically. The other thing you need to be careful about discussing is the size of, or the portion amount that a person might be choosing to eat. Just like with the type of food as being a good food choice or a bad food choice, the discussion surrounding the portion size can also cause adverse effects on the person, where they may increase their anxiety level, may hide food and hide food portion, or quote unquote, the snacks, or sneak a meal, so as to not be socially ostracized for having larger portion size. What we don't want to do is we don't want to elevate anxiety levels around food, or around food choices, or around food portion. That will cause an increase in their anxiety around the food and can cause issues that may lead to eating disorder style behavior. At the same time, we don't want to have discussions around, as we stated earlier, pertaining to what you might do as a consequence within such as, oh, it's okay for me to have this piece of dessert because I'm going to exercise tomorrow. What you're doing is you're the person with anxiety issue up for a change in thinking, a change in cognition surrounding food, where they will feel anxious about eating the food because they may not have the opportunity to do the exercise that you are suggesting is necessary in order to offset the food that they are eating. This idea about food being offset by exercise is an incorrect view regarding and an incorrect view about nutrition and nutrition balance relative to calorie and calorie balance, based off of the misconception that calorie balance is necessary for weight maintenance or for weight loss. What we have for too long is utilized an incorrect idea of calorie in and calorie out as relates to body weight, body composition, and overall health. A pattern of thought that has elevated the risk for exercise bulimic behaviors in individuals that are at risk for succumbing to those types of eating disorder issues. What we want to make sure that we're doing when we're looking at meals and meal sizes, particularly around holidays, is to not elevate any level of anxiety with the meal, but utilize the meal as a social gathering. Utilize the meal as a way to enjoy people's time and people's company, not increase the level of anxiety that might come about through my viewpoint or your viewpoint surrounding what type of food a person should be eating or should not be eating, how much of a food someone should be eating or not eating, or whether or not a specific food is good for them or bad for them. One of the things you have to remember is that if I have in my mindset something as taboo, I'm more likely to attempt it than to not attempt it. Well, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you got a little bit out of the conversation here. Remember that when you are enjoying meals over the holidays, the way in which you frame the viewpoint about food and about food portions and about food choices will have a lasting impact, not just on yourself, but on those around you. Try to use a positive mindset when it comes to food and food choices. Try to be open and caring. Try to be willing to have conversations with people. Be empathetic to people that might have issues surrounding food anxieties. Be empathetic to people who feel like they have to constantly compare themselves to others, not just within their immediate households, within their extended families, but to society as a whole. We're all constantly comparing ourselves. And you need to have a healthy mindset, an open mindset, a caring mindset, to ensure that you do not instill eating disorders or eating disorder-like behaviors on individuals within your family or within your close network of friends. Hopefully you got a little bit out of this conversation. Please make sure that you are sharing out what we're putting out there, particularly this conversation here. If you have comments or questions about eating disorders, or if you might think you have an eating disorder, contact your personal care physician. If you're scared to contact your personal care physician, use any of the online resources that are out there. But also remember that this one day of eating, this 1 week of having feasts within it, is not going to ruin all of the progress you've put in. It's not going to undermine all of the changes that you've made. You can think of it as a reward, as a potential reward. But it's also something you don't have to somehow have justification for eating all this food, where you say, oh, well, I'm going to go and run. Oh, I'm going to go work out. It doesn't have to balance itself out. Remember, it's not about calories in, calories out. So making sure you're in your correct nutrient balance in the long term, not based off of 1 day or 1 week. But hopefully you got a little bit out of the conversation here. Yes, some of the stuff we've talked about previously. Yes, some of the stuff is a rehash of a lot of points that we've been making, basically about this time of the year for the last few years. But it's still something worth revisiting, something worth talking about. If you have questions or comments, please make sure you leave it for us. We're more than happy to address them. If you're liking what we're putting out there, please make sure you're giving us that thumbs up, give us that 5-star rating, let us know that we're doing a good job. Please make sure you're following us here on the podcast as well as on YouTube. The written stuff in Substack, as well as the quick takes we post to Instagram and Threads, and now on Blue Sky. Please stay tuned for future discussions on the misconceptions we have about how the human body works and how we go about living a healthy life.